Good morning, fellow citizens, wherever you are viewing us from. Welcome to this very short briefing. I'm making this briefing today ahead of Hakainde Hichilema's press briefing to be held in an hour from now. And on behalf of the Patriotic Front and on behalf of many citizens of goodwill, I hope that Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, will use the opportunity of his press conference today to resign. That is my number one message, that I'm really hoping that President Hakainde, who has postured as the best president Zambia has ever had, will seize this opportunity to also be the first president to resign on account of failure to govern this country to the expectations of the citizens. Like many Zambians, we have learned that President Hakainde Hichilema today intends to hold a press conference where he probably will review the year, and we are sure that he will use that press briefing to defend his extremely poor record of governance and his shoddy performance. So far, President Hakainde Hichilema has served for over 2 years, and now Zambia is remaining with 2 years, 4 months before we hold the next elections. And this is the reason why I'm suggesting to him that halfway through his tenure, his performance has shown that for him to continue will just cast even further disaster on this country. And for the sake of this country, and indeed, if he does love this country, in the manner that he said to us Zambians before he was elected, this is an opportunity for him to redeem Zambians from the suffering occasioned to them by Hakainde himself and his New Dawn government. This is the reason why I have decided to address you, fellow citizens. And I'd like to be succinct. First, 2023 itself exposed President Hakainde Hichilema's incompetence and poor performance. We must state from the outset that the performance of President Hakainde Hichilema has been extremely poor, and everybody can attest to that. And like the old adage goes, power doesn't change character, it simply reveals it. And indeed, power has revealed Hichilema's character. Beyond revealing Hakainde's character, power in the hands of Hakainde Hichilema has been terribly abused. And Hakainde has failed in many respects. Number one, Hakainde bragged with his computer going across the country, using all social media platforms, using television during his campaign for 19 years. He campaigned on the basis that he was the most educated economist and that he had an economic recovery plan. Today, 2 years after being elected, Hakainde has failed to implement any economic recovery plan. He criticized the previous governments, not only the Patriotic Front, he criticized all previous governments, and he postured as a person who had an economic recovery plan. So far, he has failed to implement any economic recovery plan. Secondly, Hakainde Hichilema has failed terribly to unite the country. Now we are hearing about divisions. We are hearing people complaining when a few people just post on social media, a small group called Umozi Kumawa, then he raises concerns. And yet nobody is raising concern about Hakainde Hichilema being the patron of Jundu Jaitwa. Nobody is complaining about that. And Hakainde is not reminding people that he is the patron of Jundu Jaitwa. When he hears about Kola Foundation, he sends all his Koswe and so on to complain, because he himself has failed terribly to unite the country. Hakainde has failed to secure peace and security for the country. This is the reason why you hear the Inspector General of Police stopping opposition political parties from holding rallies. And what is the reason that's advanced by the IG? That there are security concerns. Now, fellow citizens, if the Police Inspector General is the first one to say we have security concerns, then who is it who's going to ensure that security is provided to the citizens? It is the duty of the Inspector General of Police to ensure that there is security in the country. But the Inspector General of Police has resigned to that fact and is now complaining, telling every investor, telling every Zambian, telling foreigners, telling the whole world that in Zambia there is a sense of insecurity. Hakainde has failed lamentably to provide peace and security in the country. Beyond that, Hakainde Hichilema has failed to uphold the rule of law. He has always been going around the whole world saying that he's governing this country by the rule of law. And yet the truth of the matter is that he's governing this country by the rule of man. And that one man is no other than Hakainde Hichilema. Hakainde has also grossly undermined institutions of democracy. There is no longer any institution that can uphold democracy in the country. All institutions of governance have been weaponized against especially the opposition and the Patriotic Front in particular. Hakainde has threatened the continued existence of democracy in the country. He is bragging that he has managed to buy the Patriotic Front. How can a democratic president, Republican president, ever rejoice when he sees that an opposition political party is put asunder by his own machinations, by his own doings? That is a failure on the upholding of democratic space by Hakainde Hichilema. There is a serious shrinkage of the democratic space in this country. And Hakainde has consistently failed to respect freedoms and rights of citizens. In Zambia now, people don't even have the right to go to church. People don't have the right to go to hospitals. People don't have the right to go to markets. Very soon, people will not even have the right to have property, to have homes, to have children, all because of Hakainde's insatiable appetite for power. While this is happening, Hakainde Hichilema is too proud to accept his failures to deliver service. He is too self-conceited to apologize for his failure to honor his own unfulfilled election campaign promises. And I would like to suggest to you, us Zambians, that we should expect more gloating and more boastful lies from his press briefing today. And as a matter of fact, even his followers have fallen in the same trap. They have learnt the art of lying. As you heard on one television interview, one of his best friend, one of his appointed members of parliament, was telling lies that there are schools being opened everywhere, there are classrooms being opened everywhere in the country, and yet he couldn't name one school. He was just boasting that there are so many schools that are being opened, that are being built by Hakainde Hichilema's New Dawn. When asked, tell us one name of one school, he was not able to do that, because this government is a government of liars, a government that is not capable of telling the truth. And today, again, in a few hours today, Zambians, prepare yourselves to receive even more lies, even more boastful statements from Hakainde Hichilema, because that is what he is, a boastful man. As far as he's concerned, the world evolves around him. Now, while that is happening, in the country we're witnessing the highest cost of living ever since 1990. Our currency and the exchange rate market continues to be unstable, making the kwacha the worst performing currency in the world. The Zambian kwacha today is the worst performing currency in the world. And yet we have such a boastful president who claims that presidents of other countries, even presidents who have been president for 10 years before Hakainde became president, he is claiming they are coming to him to try and learn. What can they learn from a failure such as Hakainde? He's such a boastful man. He says, everyone is asking me how I'm managing the economy, how I'm managing Zambia. Which president would want to learn from Hakainde Hichilema? Because learning from him is learning only one thing, to be boastful. If there's a second lesson they can learn from Hakainde is how to lie. If there's a third lesson they can learn from Hakainde is how to not to keep his promises. Those are the three things they're capable of learning from Hakainde. And I wonder which president in this world would want to learn those characters of President Hakainde. The UPND government criticized us for borrowing, and yet it is borrowing at a far faster rate than any of the previous governments ever did. I want to give you a few examples. Number one, the IMF has so far released $561 million against the $1.3 billion bailout plan. I would like to ask Hakainde, today as he addresses us, he must tell us, what has the new Dawn government done with the $561 million? Last year, in 2022 alone, the World Bank released a total of $750 million. And this was one of the largest disbursements ever made by the World Bank to a poor country in 1 year. Can President Hakainde today please tell the Zambian people what his government did with the $750 million? What did they spend that money on? Because we see no schools being built. We see no hospitals being built. We see no roads being built. What did he use the $750 million on? To us, clearly, Hakainde Hichilema and his new Dawn government is borrowing for consumption, while the Patriotic Front borrowed for infrastructure and production. And the legacy is there to see by everybody. Let me go to a few sectors of the economy which are very important, because all sectors, as a matter of fact, are in a crisis. Let me pick a few. The agriculture sector, the mining sector, the energy sector, local governance, economic and social sectors are all in a crisis. The agriculture sector, for instance, is plagued by poor distribution of farming inputs and chaotic policies which are putting our food security in a very perilous situation. The sale and export of our national maize grain strategic reserves, driven by corruption, was a grave error. A very serious error of judgment by Hakainde Hichilema. This is the reason why today many families in Zambia cannot afford the staple food meal. Secondly, the mining sector. Instead of Hakainde Hichilema strengthening the capacity of ZCCMIH in owning KCM and Mopani, Hakainde chose dubious investors to take over the assets under very unclear terms. We were told by the Minister of Mines that, as a matter of fact, the agreement over KCM was not even a signed agreement, it was a verbal agreement. Who made that verbal agreement to sell our major asset? How can Hakainde, just over a cup of tea, give away our asset without putting it to paper, without signing any agreement, against the law of Zambia? Because according to the constitution of Zambia, when there is a sale of any major asset of the government, Parliament must approve. Instead, Hakainde decided to just sell on a verbal agreement. Beyond that, President Hakainde, as all of us know, gave away our rights to critical mineral resources to the USA and to the UK. A lot of you citizens who remember when Hakainde Hichilema went and stood behind his Minister of Mines in the United States of America, signing off together with DRC our critical minerals, electric vehicle minerals. He signed them off to the USA. We also saw, ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, how Hakainde allowed that the UK must enter into some dubious agreement over what they called critical minerals with the United Kingdom Secretary of State. Now, how can one man be giving away our assets without even presenting to us citizens the content of those agreements? As though that is not enough, at the moment we have a national crisis where we've lost between 35 and 90 miners at Sensele mine in Chingola. To date, there are no adequate measures that have been put in place to rescue or retrieve the remains to help families hold decent burials. Further, there is no explanation to show the clear culpability of mine owners and government itself in this matter. The government is playing to the gallery, stage acting, and saying we have retrieved a body, we have retrieved a person. How do you retrieve only one person and hope that you're going to give patience and joy to the families of those many miners who are still trapped in that mine accident? Up to now, we don't even know the exact number of those who are feared dead. All we can do is to pray to God for the families of those miners. When such an accident last happened in Zambia, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda in 1976 had to leave State House to go to the Copper Belt to go and mourn with the bereaving families. Today in 2023, we have a president who even stays in Dubai 3 days after he hears about such a calamity, such a catastrophic disaster that occurred on the mines. May the souls of the departed miners rest in peace. Fellow citizens, it is sad to learn that the evaluation status of a mine by the Mine Safety Department and the Zambia Environmental Management Agency that prevents any mining until safety measures could be set up made that report over Sensele mine, and yet it was ignored, totally ignored, and that is what led to the calamity that occurred at Sensele. The experts had made caution against mining, and yet the mine owners did not bother. Further, the decision to drop criminal and civil proceedings against First Quantum Minerals and its directors, earlier undertaken by ZCCMIH, meant to recover $2.5 million irregularly drawn from Kansenshi mine without guaranteeing how this money will be recovered, is yet one of the many scandals plaguing this government. The scandalous decision to convert, without parliamentary authority, ZCCMIH shares in Kansanshi into dividend payments is yet another of the many scandals occasioned by Hakainde Hichilema and his New Dawn government. The failure to allow ZCCMIH to take control of gold discoveries, including rare gemstones such as sugilite and other prized gemstones across the country, only grants such exploitation to be done by unscrupulous persons, especially foreign nationals, but all of them having connections with State House, or is it Community House? Fellow citizens, we saw the jumping and filibustering and priding of themselves by Hakainde and his Minister of Finance and the whole New Dawn government over the debt restructuring process. They bragged and said the PF failed to come up with a debt restructuring process. They failed to enter into an agreement with the IMF and the World Bank in 7 years, and they only did it in a few months. Now, in 2017, Zambia, together with the IMF and the World Bank, conducted the debt sustainability analysis to evaluate our public debt. After this analysis, it was established that Zambia's debt carrying capacity was weak, and the country commissioned a debt restructure process of its foreign debt by one, hiring Lazard Ferres of France to handle the bondholders of the 3 billion euro debt. That was in 2017. Secondly, the country engaged into bilateral talks with China to cancel or reschedule or restructure the debt arising from project financing of various infrastructure. But in 2021, the new Dawn government abandoned this process and instead adopted an IMF-driven process using the new G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatment. And then they bragged and bragged. And yet since then, out of the 14.2 billion, government has managed to restructure and reschedule the debt of 6.3 billion, mostly with China, under the Official Creditors Committee. Our worry is the recently announced success to restructure of the $3 billion which government entered into agreement was immediately cancelled 2 weeks later because of its scandalous nature. That agreement, unfortunately, was cancelled only 2 weeks after the agreement was entered into, because the Official Creditors Committee realized that this was a scandalous deal. On 26th of October 2023, Minister of Finance Dr. Stumbeko Musokotwane announced that Zambia had reached an agreement in principle with the Zambia External Bondholder Steering Committee to restructure the $3 billion bond. After this announcement, Zambia's 3 bonds rose sharply at the London Stock Exchange. What followed later was chaos. Zambia was ordered to cancel the agreement by both the IMF and by China. This development crushed the bonds and huge losses were recorded. Why was this debt restructuring deal, hailed as a milestone a few days, cancelled? It is simple. The process was ridden by high-level corruption. And here are some of the details of the agreement. Number 1, the face value of the bond was raised from 3 billion to 3.135 billion. The face value of the bond. Secondly, Zambia agreed to have a haircut or a discount of 18%, and yet the 6.3 billion China loan was made to accept a haircut of 40%. How could that be? How could that be accepted by anyone? On one hand, Zambia agreed to a haircut of 18%, and yet for the 6.3 billion China loan, China was made to accept a haircut of 40%. Obviously, this is against the G20 agreement. It's against the G20 principles. Number 3, the $821 million accumulated debt service obligation since December 2020 was to be written off as per condition of the G20 framework. Zambia instead agreed to settle this amount. An amount which was supposed to have been written off. Zambia agreed that they will settle the payment. Fourth, Zambia agreed to deliver 2.5 billion cash flow relief to the bondholders despite and during the duration of the 1.3 billion bailout. Clearly, this deal was awful, as the country would have been sent into immediate debt distress. The very crisis the restructuring process was expected to resolve. Where was Zambia going to get 2.5 billion in 2024 to pay the bondholders? So, what drove this bad deal? Did anyone ask for kickbacks? Citizens, can you ask President Hichilema today at his press briefing? What drove this bad deal? Who was involved in this bad deal? After the cancellation was announced, Zambia's bonds created a market crisis, and the bonds traded at their lowest they have ever been, with traders incurring unimaginable losses within a period of 2 weeks. This setback has now endangered the earlier debt of 6.3 billion agreement with China, calling for fresh negotiations and thereby delaying the G20 common framework debt restructure. And this could probably for years. Number 4, governance, human rights, and rule of law. Yes, President Hakainde has gone around posturing as a man who is governing Zambia by the principles of rule of law. Now, as Hakainde faces clear diminishing political fortunes and the prospect of an electoral loss in 2026, he has resorted to dictatorial tendencies, abusing human rights and abandoning practicing good tenets of democracy and good governance. Hakainde Hichilema has chosen a destructive path by arresting political opponents without justification, seizing their assets, bank accounts, and closing their businesses. Hichilema has further weaponized law enforcement agencies against his political opponents. He has significantly eroded the separation of powers of the judiciary, legislature, and the executive. Look what he's doing with the Patriotic Front, Zambia's largest political party. He has imposed a stooge on the party, and he is supporting him all the way. Every maneuver of the stooge is being supported by Hakainde Hichilema himself. All atrocities being occasioned on the Patriotic Front are actually not only sanctioned, but protected and defended by President Hakainde Hichilema. Hichilema organized a conference for the stooge, secured the venue with a large contingent of heavily armed policemen and women, and anti-riot gear equipment. They packed the so-called conference with UPND supporters, without any members of the Patriotic Front. Just junkies were in that conference, and they ended up declaring Hakainde Hichilema's stooge as president of the Patriotic Front. Hakainde Hichilema's government proceeded to recognize the UPND stooge by unlawfully changing the records of office bearers at the Registry of Societies, by illegally changing the leadership of the opposition in parliament, and by Number 3, to disclose that the DPP and the suspects were personal friends and previously enjoyed client-lawyer relationship was not disclosed. The DPP did not tell Zambians that, as a matter of fact, he is a personal friend of the accused, and that they have a relationship which spans probably decades. This reminds me of the issue of the then DPP Mutembo Nchito, who was found culpable by the court when he chose to prosecute his own friends. The High Court said he couldn't. He had to declare interest. In this particular case, the current DPP should also have declared interest. He should have recused himself. Instead, he went ahead and stopped criminal proceedings against their stooge. Why? Because they are serving their master. The DPP neglected to declare interest, and that in itself is a misconduct. You just have to see how even the ECZ chose to amend the procedures of filing of nominations, again only to suit the stooge of the UPND who has been imposed to posture as leader of the Patriotic Front. All of a sudden, the ECZ, which is being chaired by another UPND stooge, decided that they're going to change the procedure of filing nominations. Never has this country ever demanded that the names of office bearers who signed adoption certificates must be indicated on the certificates. But now, only because they wanted to save their stooge, they amended the procedure. And this is how you saw that in the 3 by-elections, 2 of our candidates filed their nominations, which were declared to be unsuccessful. How can that be? Fellow citizens, as you listen to Hakainde Hichilema today, I would like you to ask him these pertinent questions. Why is he shrinking the democratic space in the country? I want to conclude by saying lies, lies, and more lies is what we expect to hear from President Hakainde Hichilema today. Lies, lies, boasting, threats, intimidation is all that we expect to hear when President Hakainde Hichilema addresses the press today, because that is what he's made of. Again, I want to emphasize that power does not change a person's character. Power just reveals a person's character. And indeed, power that was vested in President Hakainde in 2021 has now revealed the true character, the true persona of Hakainde Hichilema. Today, we urge Mr. Hichilema to use this opportunity of his press conference to do one noble thing: resign and save Zambians from the pain and suffering they are going through because of his incompetence, his interest in saving himself and foreigners, his disloyalty to the Constitution, and his quest to destroy democracy and the multi-party state of Zambia. By his actions to assault democracy, the rule of law, and by flagrantly abusing the Constitution, he remains a present danger to the well-being of Zambia. He is also a serious threat to our peace, security, and unity as a country. He should resign. For all Zambians of goodwill, I want to assure you that we in the leadership of the Patriotic Front shall not give up the struggle. We shall continue to struggle until we redeem Zambia from the dungeons of insecurity, from the dungeons of dictatorship. We shall save this country from being declared a one-party state, because we know that that is Hakainde Hichilema's agenda. He wants to annihilate the Patriotic Front and all other opposition political parties. He wants to expel all PF members of parliament and independent members of parliament so that he can have it easy to amend the constitution, for him to expand his tenure of office from 5 years to 7 years, for him to remove the 50% plus 1 electoral system so that he has first past the post, because he knows that with the 50% plus 1, there is no way that he can win elections in 2026. We know that he wants to remove the running mate clause because he wants to have power over everybody. The running mate that he has now, for him, is a threat because he can't remove her. The process of removing the running mate is very difficult, and that doesn't sit well for Hakainde Hichilema. He wants to be the king, and the only king. Unfortunately, when you are a king, when you put on a high pedestal, you are also open to scrutiny. And especially when you're given power, then your character is revealed. And once your character is revealed in the manner that Hakainde Hichilema's character has been revealed, the only thing that Zambians see in him is dictatorial tendencies. And this is the reason why we in the Patriotic Front urge President Hakainde Hichilema to do the only noble thing today, to declare his resignation. Thank you very much, citizens, for listening. And I'd like you to go and listen to Hakainde and listen to his lies, boasting, intimidation, and threats, because that is all that the press briefing is going to be about. Thank you very much. See you soon.